Hello there, Liveabroad fans. Are you actually properly insured in Portugal? Very important question. In this episode, we are going to talk with Fernando Mendes. Fernando is a utility service provider, specialized also in all kinds of insurances. Health insurance, car insurance, house insurance. In this episode, we are going to talk about the two very important topics, house and car insurance. When you want to contact Fernando directly, you can do that by clicking his link in the description under this video. You also, of course, see his logo, all his coordinates in the video itself.
Good afternoon, Rob. Yes, we're back here for the second season, as it looks like. So here today, we're here to obviously, first of all, thank you for the opportunity once again. Always a pleasure speaking here on these type of interviews and webinars, helping clients out. Today, we're going to be looking into one of my other sections of my business, which is precisely an insurance agent, and we're going to look at here three main types of insurances. We're going to concentrate for now on house and car insurances, and then on a future episode we're going to be speaking about health insurance. Sorry. So a pleasure once again to meet you, and go ahead.
So, as you know, we had severe storms in Portugal the latest time. Katrina, Manuel. I don't know how they...
Here in Portugal, sadly, I think we all saw that. I think that sometimes internationally wasn't, a lot of people didn't realize the extent of damage, but it was something really serious with the ongoing conflicts across the world, kind of side posted. But obviously, as we said in Portugal, it was a train of events here. So a train of storms, basically 2 weeks for people who weren't...
2 weeks,
Two weeks, 7 storms was really something hard hit, especially in the central Portugal, the main section of Portugal that was really hard hit, all the way from the ocean, all the way inland to Castelo Branco. So it went from Portugal, from coast to the inland, to the Spanish border.
Yeah, it was a disaster. When you say storm, you say insurance. So the question is storm damage always included in Portuguese home insurance? Or are there specific conditions or limits people should know about?
Here in Portugal, generally speaking, the insurance policies cover all the damages. Normally here, us at the office here, what we do is when I do a house insurance quotation, and then when I issue the policy, it includes all the coverages. The only optional coverage that's normally practiced on the market is earthquake coverage, which I always include as standard. I've only had probably 3 or 4 cases during all these years, clients who did not want earthquake coverage. So when we speak of all the coverages, it's basically any damage on the house, which means the structure or the contents, in terms of the following coverages: for fire, theft, or robbery if you want to call it, natural disasters, so storms, lightning, floods, landslides, forest fires. For some people who live close to the forest fires, that is all included, as well as earthquake. Just to say that under earthquake, there's a very important note that all the insurance companies, they apply a deductible or an excess of 5% of the rebuild value, or we'll speak a bit of what that means, or the content value in terms of the specific earthquake coverage. The rest, you normally have a very minor deductible of around €100, or there's no deductible applied. So in general, yes, it is. All the coverages are included. I know some countries, especially people from America, a lot of insurance companies, they exclude some of these coverages. Here, thankfully, until the moment, they are all included. And I do it all as part of standard practice. The difference is so minimal to exclude any of the coverages, it never makes sense. So I include all of those, the destruction due to natural disaster, as we say.
Yeah, another very important question that I hear, and I don't have the answer, of course, that is, should a home in Portugal be insured for the purchase price, the market value, or the rebuilding value?
That's a big can of worms, as we say. So technically, when we insure the property, There's a checklist I send out to clients, and one of the most important questions is precisely the size of the house in square meters here. Being in Europe, we work in square meters. And then that generates by the insurance company what we call the rebuild value, the replacement value if you want. What does this mean? You can buy a property, for example, as the purpose of the exercise. Let's say you bought a property for 500,000 euros, but that house, for example, has an area, a living area of 200 square meters. There is a national table, which the insurance companies use, that is launched by the government, which gives the average cost, the rebuild cost. And let's suppose, for example, for a 200 square meter property, the rebuild value is 200,000 euros. So in case of total loss or destruction, the insurance company is going to pay the client the damage, obviously build on the rebuild cost. Even though the client bought the property for 500,000, that was the purchase price, and then something different is how much the market price will be. It can escalate. There can be a crisis where the property value lowers to, let's say, half of it. But one thing is always the same, is the average rebuild cost. There are some, and be aware of this, I always tell people this, that we work with 10 companies at the office, and some companies allow us to manually tell the system how much the property is worth. And that is a complete mistake. And I think that is more of a procedure to rip clients off. If someone tells me, well, Fernando, I paid 500,000 euros for the house, so I want that to be on the coverage. I can do it with one or two companies, but never, and I underline never, will the insurance company, in case of a claim, whatever the source of the claim was, will they pay that the amount I'm putting on the policy. They always base it on the rebuild value and on the quotations. So let's say a builder, and to explain a bit better here, on that, back to the example, the 200 square meter property, which for example has an average rebuild value of, let's say, 200,000 euros, but the client bought it for 500,000 euros. That's part of business. There was some profits because when the builder has how much it costs to do it, and then how much he would charge to do similar work on another property to rebuild it, and then there's, let's call it the profit, not a simple calculation, but the profit they put on top of it. So that's something different. How much you paid for the property, how much is the market value, how much you're going to get back from your property 3 or 4 years down the road, and then something else is the rebuild value. That rebuild value is calculated by the insurance company. You should always be aware when you're doing a house insurance policy, a quotation initially, make sure that's based on the average rebuild value. Then there's some factors which can push up the rebuild value a little bit more. Is it a high quality? Where is it located? But that the insurance system will automatically calculate based on the address. So careful with that because even if you are over insuring the property, where let's suppose it's worth 200,000 euros, the rebuild value, you had an insurance company which allows you to insure it for 500,000, you will never receive that money. They base it on the rebuild value. And one final note on this question: the insurance policy will go up every year because, as we know, there's inflation applied. So let's suppose this year the property is worth 200,000 euros. Next year, with a property inflation, a rebuild inflation of, let's say, 5%, it's then worth, for example, 210,000 euros. So your premium will be adjusted to include that raise. Or else, if you were never to touch the initial rebuild value given on the policy when it was issued, in 10 years down the road, probably the property the rebuild value is not enough for actually repairing the property. That's why they adjust it every year based on the inflation. The government is always on top of the issue, and they have the national table where they base it on.
Okay, that's clear. If a neighbor's tree falls on your house during a storm, whose insurance actually covers the damage?
First of all, if your neighbor's tree falls on your property, I think you're not going to be a good neighbor anywhere. You can be a little bit upset. But let's hope it doesn't happen. It's happened here. Because what happens here, technically, the responsibility, the liability lays on the neighbor, because your insurance is going to cover the damage your property causes on yourself and onto the neighbor. So the tree is in the neighbor's field. It collapsed onto your garden or something worse onto your house. It is then the neighbor's policy's responsibility for them to cover under the liability.
Many expats only live in Portugal part of the year. Does leaving a house empty for long periods affect insurance coverage?
I think, first of all, they should live full-time to enjoy the country all the year round. But I understand it's not possible. What happens here? When you do a house insurance, there's two types of policies we can do based on your permanent address here or your secondary address, as we call it. Because if you're in Portugal, even though let's suppose you only have one main house here, but if you were absent more than 6 months, that technically, in terms of insurance policy for the companies, is considered a secondary house. And that needs to be mentioned, because then if they realize that you're absent for more than 6 months, they can eventually then not cover the claim if they realize you didn't give the correct information. So the rule is, if you are here in Portugal at least 6 months of the year, that's considered your primary coverage here. If it's your secondary, if you're more than 6 months absent, you're here only 2 months per year, then that's your secondary address here, even though it's your only property here in Portugal that you own. What happens is that on that aspect, the difference mainly is going to be with the coverages and the amounts they're going to cover in case of theft or robbery for valuable items. For example, let's suppose gold or jewelry, because that should technically not be at your secondary address. So there will just be slight differences on how much they cover, especially on those valuable and precious items. But you should always ask when you're doing with the insurance agent that, or tell them it's your main address if you're let's say if you're here more than 6 months per year or not.
Okay. Things like gardens, swimming pools, outdoor kitchens, and solar panels or terraces, are they automatically covered?
Normally, yes, if you specify, when the quotation is done, you specify to include that. Each insurance company is covered a little bit differently. For example, here, one of the main companies I work with that have a really good balance between quality and price for house insurances, they automatically cover all the garden and surrounding, including in the rebuild value, and they automatically pay that. Some insurance companies you have to specify, but obviously that's on one of my, I do a checklist. I send a standard checklist to clients, and that's one of my questions. If you have fencing, if you have a swimming pool, because then you also have the issue of then having liability on that swimming pool, because the liability will cover only guests, not yourself or direct family members. So that's one of the coverages that are included automatically when you declare you have a swimming pool. On the issue of annexes, the annexes are covered on one main rule idea here, is that your annex is built of a similar structure material as the house. Let's, for example, say you have a standard concrete house and you have an annex of a wooden house. Since the material is different, they won't cover that wooden house because it's of a different material. If it's of a similar material, it's included. And then in terms of garden furniture, that's also included. So yes, that is all included as part of the garden. Let's imagine you have a house with a huge land of 10,000 square meters, or 2 or 3 acres or 4 acres. They only include as the immediate garden area around the house, not all the way at the bottom of the land where you have trees. That's excluded. So the immediate area where you have all the construction building around the garden is included. Mm-hmm. You need to make sure also that all those annexes are included in the paperwork or in the registration of the property, because one of the documents in case of a huge claim, the assessor are going to check the construction area, the dependent area, which is the area around the house, make sure that's all included. So yes, it is covered. It's declared on the policy, and you're going to have coverage for it.
Is home insurance mandatory in Portugal?
One very important question, and it'll shock people a lot. Yes and no. Home insurance is not mandatory. The only insurance that is mandatory in Portugal is apartment insurance. Comes from a very old law here in Portugal, where it has to be at least for fire insurance there, because if you have an issue on an apartment, you can easily damage your neighbor above or below or outside of you. It's sad that the government has not made that law mandatory to all houses, because Rob was saying, and very well, you have that tree from your neighbor that collapses onto your property. He doesn't have insurance. You can have a bit of a headache there. It should always be mandatory, I think, because it's very affordable. I don't like to go to the discussion of the prices, because I've learned on my career that people take this ballpark figure too literally. But I mean, you can have insurance easily from 150 to 300 euros for, depending per year, obviously, depending on how much you're covering. But insurance is very affordable compared, especially when you're coming from a different country. It's affordable, and of the coverages you have here. So no, it's not mandatory, only on apartments, but obviously advisable. You always get insurance. I just like to add a side note on this topic here. People buying a property with a mortgage. here we have a very specific sideline here we need to follow up, is that normally, one of my jobs, I'm also a mortgage broker, so I know what I'm saying here, is that when you do a mortgage with a bank, it's mandatory you have to do the property insurance with them. Normally, the banks only make it mandatory the structure, the house itself, not the contents. And a lot of times I've seen a lot of bank managers not including the contents. So if you're going with a mortgage, obviously through a bank or a mortgage broker like me, for example, you should I always do my clients, house and contents insurance. But careful with that, because a lot of people already have an insurance from the bank. What does it cover? Did they include the contents? Because you're just in the middle of a confusion, signing paperwork, and not always do banks properly explain. So careful with that.
What is the difference between basic fire insurance and a multi-risk insurance?
It comes from the Portuguese term. What I was saying previously, the basic fire insurance is like a very old type of policy, which isn't used a lot here by insurance company, where it only covers basically the fire and explosion situation of an apartment, so that it covers the damage. But a multi-risk comes from the word multi coverages, where it covers everything, all types of natural disasters, fire, theft, robbery, explosion, break-ins, everything is covered. So that's what we technically call the multi-risk. Because the difference between a fire policy and the multi-risk is a minimal price. The insurance companies have adapted this new concept of a multi-risk policy, which covers all of the risks at a very minor difference.
Okay.
A last question, which a lot of people ask me, and I think it's important, especially in these last events, which is, Fernando, what happens in case of a claim? I think that obviously all of us insurance agents are good sellers. Everyone knows how to sell, but you need to always look at the downside of it, what happens in case of a claim, because that's something that worries someone, especially when you're an expat, you do not speak the language here.
Yes.
What did personally here, us here at the office, what I do for my clients of ASKFERNANDO.PT was that on the day the destruction happened, unfortunately, and I still have a lot of family down in that area, so I was pretty much very worried since the first minute the destruction happened. I did straight away a general guideline with all the main points that clients needed to file a claim. It's a fairly easy process filing the claim. You should go when you can through your insurance agent, or if you're working with a bank. With the bank, you're stuck because you have to contact the insurance company directly. With us insurance agents, we we filter the information, we send it to the insurance company, and we open the claim where a case number is given to the client. It's something very simple. Basically, the client just gives us the date the damage happened, more or less the time, what originated the damage. If the client has, always try a few pictures with a phone of pictures, so the insurance company can understand the extent of the damage. And then if the client can get already at least a few quotes, that would be good, or the bills of repair. With this, especially with Christine damage, it's been horrible, because the problem is that there's loads of work, and Rob living, you know how difficult it is to try and get a building company to do some repairs today, a builder. But obviously, if you can get some quotes or the bill repairs, that's good. Then, if possible, proof of your bank details if you have it. We send also your contact number, and the claim is open. Then, if it's minor damage, let's say minor, something 5,000-10,000 euros, what they're trying to do with this huge amount of damage, which was the first time Portugal experienced such a huge extent of damage, especially the insurance companies. What then is going to happen is an independent assessor, basically all insurance companies subcontract assessment companies, which are basically a lot of times civil engineers, people that are experienced in the area. They're going to analyze the damage, they're going to analyze the quotations or the emergency bills of repair, and then say, how much they're going to look if the costs are more or less average costs, and if they're acceptable, they're going to pay the claim straight away. If it's something a huge colossal damage where there's the roof came off or a huge fire, stuff like that, that's different. Then they're going to physically go to the location, they'll contact the client and do an inspection. So that's the way it works. The insurance companies are there to receive the information from us, insurance agents. There we communicate that there's damage. After that, they're going to eventually book an on-site assessment if it's necessary, if it's a huge damage. If not, the assessor remotely tries to have a video call with you and a few emails and settle the claim if you have all the quotations or the bills.
You can send photos or something. Or
Precisely. And especially here with the amount of destruction. I mean, here, there's a rough calculation here that in central Portugal, there was around 60 to 70,000 claims filed. I mean, here at the office ourselves, we're already ticking close to 700 claims. So obviously it was difficult for the insurance company to take a little bit more than desired to reply to all the claims. But if you all of a sudden you have an emergency situation where you need to at least clean up or put a bit of the roof back on so it's not raining inside, I always tell clients, take pictures of the before and of the after, so then you can explain to the assessor why you did the emergency repair with the company and you didn't wait for the assessor to come. So then we send all this information on to the insurance company. Their assessor then supplies an internal report back to the insurance company, and the Department of Claims in the insurance company authorizes or not the payments depending on what the assessor said, if all the information is correct, because obviously there are a few people who try to do a bit of fraud in the sense that they try to give quotes double the price they're trying to. That's why the assessor is there. He looks at how many square meters of damage there was and the repairs. If they're more or less aligned, they proceed. And it's always important that here, one thing I had a few issues with clients was that clients were rushing into the claims, and I had a few cases, sadly, where quotations given on the first 2 to 3 days, and they supply that to the insurance companies. The insurance companies pay those quotes, and all the clients go back to the insurance companies, to the builders that quoted the damage, and now they will not, they say they won't do the repair because it's a bit higher. So sometimes getting a quote straight away, careful with that. On this amount level of destruction, a lot of people realize that the quote given on the first week now has probably almost doubled as 1 month after damage. So careful with that. Some insurance companies rushed assessors onto the location, settled the claims, paid, and now the clients don't have enough money to pay the claim. What they do is, if you supply a bill where you have obviously paid your tax on that bill, it's normal. The insurance company will refund you the full amount. If you give a quote, let's suppose you have a repair quote of 20,000 euros plus 23% tax, the insurance company pays you the amount of the quote, and then when you pay fully the construction company the repair, you then have to pay the tax. Then the insurance company afterwards will refund you the tax. And also, a last note, the insurance companies never organize for a construction company to repair the damage. The client must always get the quotes and get someone to go and repair the damage. The insurance company only pays. They never supply with a list of builders to help you. That never happens.
Okay, Fernando, we are going to talk about the car insurance now. Also very important for everybody.
Yes, I mean, people arrive, they rent a car, they realize it costs them a kidney trying to rent a car. So when you're here full time, it's advisable you buy a car. And of course, once you buy the car, you need car insurance.
Yeah. So, very normal question: is it also mandatory in Portugal to have a
car insurance is mandatory in Portugal. Obviously, car or any road vehicle on the road, especially plated vehicle, has to have insurance. There could be some vehicles, machines that are on the road without plates. That's very rare, but they have that the liability included. So yes, going here by parts, it's mandatory. A road vehicle has to have insurance. A side note on that, this is mandatory, especially when you're buying a car from the minute the vehicle starts driving on the road. Some countries, and I know in case of America a lot of times, what they do differently is that the dealer supplies it with a temporary insurance to get back home. No, here, you buy the car, you have to have the car insured from the moment you're driving off the dealership. That's why you do the quote before and you issue the policy before. It's not what's mandatory by law, what we call the liability coverage, which is minimum liability of 7.7 million for bodily harm and material harm caused by an accident. The person who causes the accident, the insurance of that vehicle is the insurance policy that will cover the damage. That's why it's a minimum 7.7 million. Sometimes people say, wow, that's a lot. Why 7.7 million? Let's give this Hollywood film scenario example. You're on the highway, motorway, however you want to call it. You cause an accident with a bus. And that bus is carrying, for example, 50 doctors. We use this a lot, this story in the insurance sector. Because obviously, sadly, we know that in case of a fatality, of a death, the amount, the payment given to the family of the deceased person who passes away, there'll be a different payment in terms of what the person did in terms of profession. Let's suppose you have, for example, a doctor, obviously someone who has a huge career ahead. like any other worker, but in terms of the importance working in the health sector, and easily we can be speaking of, let's say, a payment in case of death of, for example, 100,000 euros for someone who's passed away, a doctor, because of his importance in the health sector. So if you have that bus with 50 people on board, 50 doctors going to a convention, we use this example a lot, that's 50 times 100,000, that's 5 million straight away. So again, we cannot only think the small accidents, we have to be prepared, the insurance companies, for any type of accident. So that's why it's a minimum
scenario
always. So 7.7 million. So easily you have a bus with 50 people, everyone dies because you move lanes and you go onto an oncoming bus, they didn't realize, and it skids off the road down a bridge. They're a complete tragedy. Everyone dies. Your insurance policy will have to pay basically a small life insurance for all those 50 victims. So easily, if a court decides that it's at least 100,000 per victim, you can see how that easily adds up. So that's why it's a minimum coverage for liability, 7.7 million. That's what's minimum obligated by law in Portugal for a road vehicle.
Okay, I have no idea.
This is for a car insurance. If we go a bit more dense, probably won't relate to a lot of clients, but imagine if you're trying to insure a bus or a truck, which obviously can cause a huge impact in case of an accident, that's different. They go from the minimum 7.7 million, they go up to 50 million. So that's different levels, but minimum, any vehicle on the road has to have at least a 7.7 million liability coverage.
Also a motorcycle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, what are the main types of insurance, car insurance in Portugal? You have third party with extras and comprehensive, and
basically
I know that from Belgium, but I don't know what it is here.
Here in Portugal, it's very similar. We normally call it, say, 3 different levels of coverages. The third party, as Rob was saying, their third party, you're saying, well, or liability we technically call it, which is the minimum obligated by law. We have what people commonly say the fire and theft, which covers your liability plus basically any coverage except if you have an accident on your own. So the fire, theft, natural disaster. Again, natural disaster. We'll speak a bit about that ahead. And then you have finally the premium coverages, the top end coverages, which are full comprehensive. If we start here with the lower spec, the third-party coverage liability, and why do we call it third-party? Because your liability is precisely covering all third parties, any responsibilities beyond you, whether it's material damage, whether it's other vehicles on the road, or someone that you injure involved in an accident. What I add on is always a basic coverage, because the difference is so minimal. I do liability plus windscreen coverage or windshield coverage. So any glass coverage on the car. If you're driving and a small truck lets go a small stone and it chips your rear windshield, your windscreen. If you don't know who it is, and easily you have that crack to repair. So I normally insurance companies include around 1,000 euros for that coverage. Then let me just hear a quick bit of water here. Then the second level of coverage.
Yeah.
Is what here also on the basic third-party coverage, liability, windscreen coverage, roadside assistant too. This is very important. I always include it. Roadside assistant will cover you if your car breaks down. It'll bring your car to the repair shop. You say again, you tell the insurance company clearly where you want the car towed to and your passengers. Let's imagine you're up from northern Portugal in Porto. You're down on the Algarve on the lovely beaches, and your car breaks down there, and you have your whole family with you, 5 passengers. You call the roadside assistance. They send a tow truck, and then they send a taxi to bring the passengers all the way back home. So roadside assistant is included too, and in that roadside assistant, if needed, they can help you, for example, change a spare tire, or if your car doesn't start, and they can come with a booster because your battery is low. So I include that as always, at least roadside liability, roadside assistant, and windscreen coverage, and then some coverage for death, disability, or bodily harm. So that's the lower end, which is normally done, or at least for the older cars. Then we have the middle option, which is basically a mix between the minimum coverage and the high-end coverage, which is liability, third-party coverage, if you want third-party coverage, plus the fire and theft. So basically it'll cover anything except if you have an accident of your own fault. It won't cover the damage on your own car. Again, the damage to someone else is always covered under your liability. And that again will cover basically fire, theft, arson, explosion, natural disasters. Again, let's imagine you have your car parked on the side of the road. If a tree collapses, if you don't have at least this coverage, no damage will be paid. And then the only exclusion is if you have an accident on your own. So that's the middle coverage, which normally will be if someone is trying to save a little bit of money, they can't exactly afford full comprehensive, or a car that's, let's say, more than 8 to 10 years, it's difficult to get full comprehensive, then to go for this middle coverage if they can. And then we have the top coverage, which is full comprehensive, which covers everything: liability, windscreen coverage, roadside assistance, and then the coverage on your car, fully covered. An accident of your own fault, natural disaster, fire, theft, robbery, or vandalism, all covered.
Okay. Yeah, can expats transfer their no-claim bonus from one country to Portugal, from their home country to Portugal?
This is asked a lot of times, obviously. It can be used, but there are few specific conditions, and people will realize that in practice, it's not easy or not as handy. You can bring your no claims bonus from a foreign country, but if you didn't have an active insurance policy in the other country until more than 6 months when you're trying to get a quotation here, the insurance companies here will generally not accept it, because okay, you haven't been a continuous driver, you interrupted more than 6 months your driving, so we don't know how your record is. And then in practice, if you bring that no claims bonus, this is an internal process which can delay the quotation quite a bit. We have to send it to the department, to the financial department of the insurance company, ask for their approval to apply the discount. And we're speaking of a discount here of, let's say, something around average, 15%. Okay, it's 15%, but let's suppose on a car, 1,000 euros per year quotation, 150 euros. It's a bit of money, but not a huge amount. And people sometimes have a misconception that, it's going to give me a 50% bonus. That is a lie. You will not get a 50% bonus because you have a no claims bonus from another country. Because the insurance companies here, they look at one factor. One thing is driving in another country, and something else is driving here in Portugal. And let's not lie here. We know that, unfortunately, a few accidents in Portugal. Driving isn't easy in Portugal. Sometimes steep roads and narrow roads here. So the insurance company, when they look at your no-claim bonus, they're not going to give you a huge discount because you did drive safely in another country. They don't know how you're going to adapt driving here. For example, a huge difference. You're coming from the US to here. You have roundabouts, different speed limits. So you're going to probably you don't know how you're going to adapt your driving here. And even though you have a valid driver's license, a few different driving rules here. So that's why the discount isn't huge. So yes, you can use your no claims bonus as long as you have not been more than 6 months without insurance in the other country. And second of all, the discount won't be huge. Something, let's say, around a 15% discount.
Yeah, what factors influence the price of car insurance in Portugal?
The prices are always calculated with the quote system of the insurance company we're quoting with, obviously. Normally, we're looking here at the type of the vehicle, obviously. The higher value the vehicle, the more it costs. Again, in terms of the vehicle, we're looking at the similar situation as the house insurance, where there's a national table replacement value for cars, so they're going to base it on that. Again, you can buy a car, let's say 50,000 euros, and the replacement value is only 35 or 40. It's part of the business. They're giving you basically the retail value for the car dealer directly, and then they're putting a bit of the profit on top of that. So one factor is effectively the value of the car. Second factor, your driving experience. Obviously, the older someone is with more driving, you have your driver's license older, you're going to have more experience than a young driver. That affects the price too. Again, your driving record, if you have a no claims bonus from another country. If you've been here in Portugal already for 2-3 years and you have an ongoing policy here and you have the plates number, it's important you give that, because that allows me to give a further discount because it proves you already have a driving record here without any accidents. Right. And then third of all, people forget this, has to do with where you live. Really? If you live always, yes. Imagine you're living in a city. There's a higher probability of an accident, so a higher accident rate. You live inland in a more rural area, less population, it'll be, in theory, cheaper than in a city. So this affects it a lot. And I encounter this problem daily with a lot of people who already have a policy here in Portugal, and they probably bought a property, let's suppose, down south. They've now changed to Lisbon, and they haven't updated their car registration documents, where you have to do that always yourself. It's your responsibility. It doesn't, even if you change your residency address, and this is a bit of some advice, you have to go to the registration office and request the update, the change of your car registration address, because if it's not updated, it's going to generate an incorrect price. And then second of all, in terms of roadside assistance, let's suppose you're from Lisbon and you used to live down on the Algarve. And then all of a sudden, what can happen is you want your car towed back to Lisbon or bring you back home to Lisbon, but that can be an issue. If your car policy states your address is down on the Algarve, and then you're close by, but you're living up here and you want your passengers who are stranded taken back to Lisbon, this can cause a bit of a dispute. So always have your address updated. So basically 3 factors: the value of the car, your driving experience, and obviously where you're living.
Yeah, if an expat moves to Portugal with a foreign registered car, are they still properly insured while driving here?
You have to always check with the insurance policy you have of your car of the other country where it's been matriculated that you're using. Obviously, if it's within the Schengen space, normally we have the coverage letters which cover all the countries here within the European space. It won't be a huge issue, and normally that's going to cover you for like a 90-day trip, which our Portuguese policies apply the same rule. You have a Portuguese plated car and you're going back to Belgium for a road trip, and normally it's going to cover you a 60-day trip, not much more. And the same rule will apply normally in general, from what I hear feedback from clients with insurance companies of a different country. Now, what you have to be careful is, for example, let's suppose someone bringing a car from a different continent, from North America, from Asia, from Africa, different rules will apply. And that normally you have to see what your policy will specifically apply. I think that, in my opinion, if you're importing a car, you bring a car over from a different country, when you get it here, just put it in the garage, leave it there safely stored. Because if you're a European plated car, the police on the road there, they can think you're probably a tourist or you're driving around here. Now, if you bring a US plated car, that, for example, that pops out straight away. The authorities, wait a second, that's not in Europe. This car came in a container, so it's probably being imported. What's going on? They're going to easily stop you and check. And then obviously the way the claims work is that, for example, let's suppose you, as the purpose of the example, your US policy, even if they give you some coverage of, let's say, 1 month while you're bringing the car over here, the issue is, how do their claims work? Do they have a support center here? They probably won't. So in case of an accident, that's a bit difficult to work with. So my advice is, if you have a car from a European country that you're still importing and you still have a valid insurance from the country where your car was originally plated, use that according to what the policy allows you. If from outside of Europe, just pull the car over, because it's going to be, in practice, it's a bit difficult for that policy to work, and you can easily be tackled, let's call it, from the authorities, because it's strange that you have a car outside of Europe driving here.
Once you become a resident in Portugal, how long can you legally drive with a foreign registered vehicle?
No, there's that has to do a lot with obviously the entry date of the vehicle, but normally you're looking here at around 2 to 3 months. Some cases it can go up to 6 months. But again, depends on what. If it's a European car, easily the 2 to 3 months you can go. More than that, you're stuck, because it depends on how long your insurance policy of the country where you're bringing your car from. Let's suppose you're bringing a car from, for example, Belgium or Germany. You have to check with your insurance company back home how long they're going to cover your trip outside of your country. Just like the opposite. You're here in Portugal, Rob, you're going back to Belgium, your policy states for trips 60 days. So obviously if you're there 90 days and there's an accident, the insurance company says, wait a second, well, how long have you been there? Why are you there so long? That's not a normal trip, so careful with that. So normally stick with the 60-day rule again. If you're bringing a car and you're importing it here, always check with the rules with your insurance coverage back home. If you have a valid insurance with your insurance company from your country where you're bringing the car from, if they cover it, you provide the coverage letter to the Portuguese authorities, you're fine. The issue is that when that coverage letter isn't valid anymore. So careful driving foreign plated cars. Let's stick as a 2-month rule, 60 days, you're fine. More than that, double check with your policy back home what they cover.
That's clear. What should drivers do immediately after a car accident in Portugal? What is the first action they have to do?
I've had that phone call a lot of times from clients. You're involved in an accident. If you're clear and there's no doubts regarding whose fault the accident is, you can sign what we call a friendly accident form. Normally, almost all drivers have it. They can easily do it. But that's a bit of a risk. And this happens a lot. Because from the moment you've signed that form is always in Portuguese. Always. End of story. So the other driver feels you're an expat. He knows you don't speak Portuguese. and it was probably a 50-50 situation or his fault, but then he makes you sign here and there and you think he's being friendly to you, and then he can literally be causing you problems where you've been screwed on the point that you've declared yourself as being your fault, because when you sign that accident form, it's easy for the claim to be sorted. The insurance companies receive it, one driver says it's his fault automatically, so the insurance policy, they're going to send the assessor, assess the car damage, and pay straight away.
Right.
What I recommend is, if you're in an accident, safeguard yourself. Always call the police. The police will not determine whose fault it is. Careful with this. The police will take note of the accident, and there's a report that's generated, so that if the insurance companies afterwards, if both drivers involved need to see that report, they'll see it. What I do is, clients report back to me. I send a checklist of all the information I need. I then fill out that Portuguese form. Then clients will then we need to do 2 or 3 things, which is a sketch of the accident that the client has to do because I wasn't there. They need to then sign it, and that's it. And then they need to mark more or less where the car damage is on the car, because you do a sketch on the form, and then on the side section you put they have an image of cars, and you put it with an X, or if it was at the rear bumper, front or side. But it's always better if you do that. And here, I don't want to feel like I'm here defending anyone, but just being facts. When you're dealing with an insurance agent, whether it's me, whoever you're working with, and if they speak your language, they're going to help you filing the claim. We look at costs, and I have no problem making this declaration. Banks normally have lower premiums, or they charge less than a regular insurance agent through a regular traditional company, because the banks, they're literally only selling to you. You have a car accident, you call your bank manager, who was very kind when you opened a bank account. He spoke good English, and you can say, listen, I had an accident. He's going to say, well, call the insurance helpline, file it with them, and then you have a Portuguese form you need to fill out. You won't understand it, so careful. You should work with, I'm not saying you should work with an insurance agent because I'm an agent myself. Before being an insurance agent, I was a regular citizen too, and I always used an insurance agent to help me clarify doubts. One thing I'm a little bit against is that bank selling insurances, which is illegal. They can do it. No, there's doing nothing under the table or illegal. But bank managers don't really know how an insurance policy works. They don't know how to file a
profession. It's totally another profession.
Precisely, and then you're stuck with a helpline. You need to then be contacting the insurance company and doing the claim on your own. So you can do it even on we were speaking previously of a house insurance claim. That can also be filed directly through an email that the insurance company has. But with the car insurance, it's a bit more difficult, where you have to fill out that form. So you should always call the police, take pictures of the accident, always, how it was, take note of at least the car plates number, a picture of the car plates of the other driver, and then you contact your insurance agent. What I do is I fill out the form, and then clients sign, and we send it off to the insurance company. There's no rush doing it. You should do it within the next few days, but I sometimes have people panicking. Fernando, had an accident yesterday. This is Monday. I need to do it today. No, relax. You can do it within the next few days. The earlier, the better. But if your insurance agent takes 1 or 2 days to fill that form out and sign, it's okay, because you put the date and the time the accident occurred. Pictures, if you can gather the name of the driver and his phone number, good, but sometimes it's a hostile situation. Just take at least a picture of the car plates, and then the insurance companies can easily find the details of who the owner is. Exactly.
Okay. Our damages caused by storms, falling trees. Here we go again to falling trees. Are they usually covered in a standard car insurance policy?
We had spoken about this previously. If you have a third-party liability coverage only, it does not cover it. Simple as that. When you have a third-party fire and theft or full comprehensive, the natural disasters will be covered if it's included in the quote. Again, this has to always be checked, because as an average rule, a car up to 10 years, more or less, you can do a full comprehensive coverage. A car older than that becomes very difficult. You can get a third-party fire and theft, and then normally in those cases the natural disasters are included, but you have to check. But if you have an older car or only a basic insurance, a third-party coverage insurance, the damage of a tree onto your car, that damage will not be covered. And then people say, oh, it's a public tree on the side of the road, City Hall has to pay it. That is not exactly correct. If the City Hall has been carefully looking after the trees on that street and pruning them properly, and then a huge storm like Christine, and where gusting winds rip it off, that's not technically the city hall's fault because they cannot foresee this natural disaster coming. So you should always have that natural disaster coverage added onto your vehicle if possible and if you can afford it.
Yep.
And again, they will pay the replacement value of the vehicle. That's something else I want to speak of. Let's say you have, for example, a replacement value of 3,000 euros on the vehicle, an older vehicle. The damage is, for example, 2,000 euros to repair it. Generally, what the insurance companies will do is they're going to scrap the car. They pay you the replacement value, and they take the car themselves. They don't even repair it because repairing it is too close or almost the same value as a replacement value. They'd rather just pay the replacement value, and that's it.
Ah, yeah. Okay. Last question about the car insurance.
Yes.
Fernando. If a friend or family member drives your car in Portugal, are they automatically insured?
If
When they drive your car, in Portugal.
Exactly, yes. When you do a car insurance, the way I normally do it is I insure it based on the owner as being the main driver. You can put a named driver in, obviously, and that's something common that's asked, but I want my partner, my husband, and my wife to also be added on. The problem is when you name those drivers, only they can drive it. What I do is I normally do a regular policy where you have the owner of the vehicle and it's based on his driving record. And then in those cases where you're not naming drivers, basically anyone can drive the car.
Okay.
With a very important rule. Whoever's driving the car has to have a valid driver's license. We all know that. And that person has to have a NIF number. Because that person means they're resident. Even if they're not a full-time resident or they're still going through their D7, D8, whatever, but they have a NIF number. Why is this? If the police pull someone over driving a car, for example, I lend my car to a friend. I was born here, grew up in Canada, as everyone knows a bit about that on my website. And for example, I have a friend of mine coming from Canada, and he drives my car, but he doesn't have a NIF number. He's just a tourist. If the police pulls him over, he has a valid Canadian driver's license. He's fine. The problem here is with the insurance company. From the moment you're involved in an accident, if that driver doesn't have a NIF number, for the insurance company, that clearly looks to them as you're doing a rental of the vehicle. Even though you're not, it can be a family member, a friend. But since you don't have a NIF number, you don't have a connection. And in Portugal, one of the main fundamental starting points is getting a NIF number here to becoming a resident. So precisely, you need to drive the car with a valid driver's license and have a NIF number. If you don't, the insurance company has the right to not cover your insurance claim. There are some foreign insurance companies that are working here that can add those coverages on, but the majority of the insurance companies will not cover. And when I have clients saying, but I heard this, and lovely social media who said this and that, I tell clients, no problem. If you want, send an email to the insurance company, ask them, can my friend on a visit without a NIF number, can we drive your car? And you'll know the answer from the insurance company. No, straight away. So careful. When someone says, your friend can drive it here without a NIF number, folks, the insurance company in court will always use the excuse that friend or family member without a NIF number was clearly a tourist here, and instead of renting a car, he's renting the car onto him. So no, you need to have at least a NIF number.
Okay. Fine. Clear. Okay.
Avoiding problems is what I say.
That's the main thing. Eh? Yeah.
Thank you for this comprehensive interview, Fernando. Make sure to watch the second part, all about health insurance in Portugal, coming up next. And of course, subscribe, like, and share. Watch our sister channel, Liveabroad with Natalie. Click above. See you there.